Okay, so yesterday we opened up Neca's Ultimate Count Dracula, which is the first Neca monster figure that I've opened so far. But I've got three others that we're going to do this week. And this is the first of them, which is Frankenstein. And then tomorrow I'll be opening the Wolfman. And then finally, we'll be going back to Dracula for the glow in the dark version of that. So yeah, most of the figures that I have to open this week are these glow in the dark versions, which I'll probably get the ultimate versions of Frankenstein and Dracula, or I already have Dracula, Frankenstein and the Wolfman later. But for now, I have these, and these were only $25 at Target, which is pretty cheap for a NECA figure. But it's not like that Ultimate Dracula figure that came with all the bells and whistles. You can see this is just a plain figure on a card. Doesn't have any extra heads, any extra hands, any fancy accessories. What you see is what you get. This is Frankenstein. So, expanding on my personal history with Universal Monsters from yesterday, which I kind of hinted at. So, I don't remember, like a lot of people probably don't remember the first time I ever saw either Dracula or Frankenstein or the Wolfman for that matter. I do remember the first time I saw the Wolfman. I'll get back to that in a second. Specifically, the Universal Wolfman. I don't remember the first time I'd ever seen a werewolf. Maybe Scooby Doo, but but yeah, like Frankenstein and Dracula were just kind of characters that just kind of always existed to me when I was a kid. So yeah, and I was always kind of fascinated with them. But I don't know when I would have first seen those characters. Would it have been Groovy Ghoulies or something? I don't know. Uh, but I do remember always being interested in them. And when I got to elementary school, they had those little orange uh, Crestwood House monster books, and I checked those out of the library, and I was hooked. And that was what got me interested a lot in like film history and behind the scenes kind of stuff too, because they had plenty of that kind of stuff in the books. So that was where I first learned about Bela Lugosi, Boris Karloff, Lon Chaney Jr., all the people that like actually made these movies, people like Todd Browning and James Whale, and like the people that actually made the movies, and this became fascinating to me. And one day when I was staying with my grandmother for the weekend or something like that, and my cousin Amy was there. Uh, we went to a drugstore and I saw the Remco Universal Monsters action figures, and I just had to have some. And Grandmama said she would buy me two, and she got me Dracula and she got me Frankenstein. And of course, this is an homage to that Remco Universal Monsters action figure from back in the day. It even says here, uh, an authentic posable action figure based on the classic Universal's famous Mini Monsters collection from the early 1980s. Hey, that's when I was a kid, wasn't it? So yeah, she got me two of them, and of course I picked out Dracula and Frankenstein that day because those were my two favorites, and had so much fun playing with those figures. They were about the same size, same format as Star Wars action figures. So 3 3/4 inch, 5 points of articulation. Dracula, as you can see, they replicated it with their version. NECA gave him the same type of cape, where he had that vinyl Star Wars cape that kind of slipped around the shoulders. Cheesy as it was, that was what we had back then. So they did a good job recreating the package. It is a little bit different in a lot of ways. And if you go and you compare the differences, you can see them. This is actually a picture of Frankenstein from, and I'm going to call the character Frankenstein. I don't care if it's Frankenstein's monster. For the sake of the ease of this review, I'm just going to call him Frankenstein. Deal with it. But you can see there's that little bit of a burn scar on his cheek here. So that's a picture from Bride of Frankenstein. I also don't see his bangs, so because all his hair got burnt off. So so yeah, and it says NECA instead of Remco, obviously. And then on the back we got some cross-cell artwork, and this was the first three of this series that they did, which was Wolfman, Frankenstein, and the Mummy. And when they get to Dracula, then we got the rest of the series. Now, I don't know if Phantom of the Opera has been released yet in this line. Pretty sure that Creature from the Black Lagoon was a San Diego Comic-Con exclusive, so I don't know if I'm going to be able to get that one, unfortunately. I would actually rather have this one than the regular Creature because of nostalgic reasons. Just saying. And in fact, even when I do wind up getting the ultimate version, it's going to have some stiff competition against this bad boy, just because of again the nostalgic reasons. Like the way the character is painted here, it reminds me so much of that figure that I had when I was a kid, and you can't escape those kind of feelings. But yeah, it's got a photograph of Boris Karloff on here, and something interesting that I noticed. All right, so going back to the Dracula card, which this is, like I said, the newest of these, so it's got more figures on the back. But you notice that this one has something a little unique, which is it's got that Lugosi trademark on there. Like anything that's got Bela Lugosi's likeness, it's going to have that trademark on there, and that lets you know that Lugosi's estate is getting part of this cut. And I believe his son is still running that because he's a big-time entertainment lawyer. And you don't see that on the front of the Boris Karloff card or on the front of the Wolfman card. Neither one of those has a trademark on the front. But if you look at the back, and Lugosi has his on the back in this spot as well, there is a Cheney Entertainment trademark there. I don't know if you can see, because it's probably a little fuzzy on my camera, but the C in Cheney actually has a little Phantom of the Opera head embodied in it. So yeah. So we know that the Cheney estate is getting a cut from this figure. So that's nice. I don't know, since there's no trademark for Boris Karloff, if Boris Karloff's family is getting any of this chunk of change out of this. So I do know that Sarah Karloff, I'm pretty sure she's still alive. So hopefully she's getting her cut. So anyway, we'll go ahead and set those aside. Or no, I don't want to set that one aside. That's the one I want to open. Getting a little confused here. I got too much going on. All right, so Wolfman tomorrow and Dracula the day after that. So they did a nice job replicating the style of the card backs of those old Remco figures. I've talked about Remco figures on here before in terms of like the wrestling figures, because Mattel does their own retro wrestling line, the WWE Superstars, and how Remco just had like a plain black and white card back because they were kind of a cheap company. But they still made some nice figures every now and again, and Frankenstein was no exception. So let's go ahead and open them up. And I'm going to try to not mess up the card back any more than possible. But they used some robust glue to hold this on here since, it's a very heavy, very large figure. By the way, the cardboard that they used for the card back, I don't know if you've noticed this when I'm doing a review, very thick, very heavy cardstock. Like if it was any thicker, it'd be particle board. So Frankenstein is held onto the card in this bubble that kind of conforms to the shape of the figure. There we go. We just set that aside. And he's got like a little bubble underneath his head, like a little headrest. You can make sure he stays nice and comfy in there. So that was nice of them. And I did manage to get the bubble off the card without damaging the back too much. Just barely a little bit of where it peeled off where the glue was. Didn't peel off any of the background or anything like that. So I can keep that. Very cool. And then we have Frankenstein off of the card. And man, does he look cool. So Frankenstein is probably the most iconic of the Universal monsters, and it's the certainly the most famous one that they own outright. Like you can make a Frankenstein movie. The character of Frankenstein is public domain. You can make a Frankenstein comic book, whatever, but you can't do this version of Frankenstein. This one, this Boris Karloff and the Jack Pierce designed makeup. This is only Universal. Only they can use this version. So, like with Dracula, if you go through the Bela Lugosi estate, you don't have to deal with Universal. You can just go through the Bela Lugosi's estate. He played Dracula on stage, and you can be like, oh, well, this is an action figure of Dracula as, he appeared on stage as played by Bela Lugosi, and you can completely cut Universal out of that if you wanted to. If you want to do them like specifically as part of a Universal Monsters line, though, you gotta get the rights to both, and that's what NECA did here. But with Frankenstein, there's absolutely no way you can do this version of Frankenstein without Universal's approval. Now, Mego did a Frankenstein that looked kind of like this back when they restarted a few years back, but it's still not exactly this version of Frankenstein. Like, it's missing the bolts on the neck, for example. But it's close enough that I was surprised they got away with it. But of course they wound up getting the proper Universal license later on and did an actual Boris Karloff Frankenstein. Did a couple of them, I think. So yeah, it's an excellent likeness. Great head sculpt. This is the same head sculpt that's one of the ones that comes with the Ultimate figure, but this one is different because it's painted in a much more simplified manner than that one. Like, I don't have that one to compare right now, but if we compare with Bela, you can see there's like a lot of paint apps and a lot of overspray and a lot of effects that make it look like a very realistic head sculpt, whereas this is supposed to look like a toy from the 1980s. So his eyes are solid black. There's no whites to these eyes, whatsoever. And I think that gives it kind of a creepy look. Of course, Frankenstein in the movie had these kind of prosthetic pieces over his eyelids to make them look heavier. And he sculpted that way in this. But just having the all black eyes just kind of adds a little more shade to it. That's pretty cool. He's got, the black on his lips. Just black, and Frankenstein in the creature in the novel was described as having straight black lips, so I like that. And then they put a little bit of shading around the eyes. Again, this is the way that Remco did it back in the 80s. This is a pretty simplified version of Frankenstein. You can even see, if you look at his bangs, you can see how the bangs were sculpted in on the original figure, but they just kind of painted them in like this sort of blobby sort of way, again, like how it was done in the 80s. And he's got a green shirt underneath this black jacket, again, just like the 80s version had a green shirt. Now, in the 80s one, like the jacket was open, and there was kind of like this texture to the shirt underneath that made it look like it was a sweater or something like that. I always liked that. But of course, NECA is just kind of using the molding that they have, so don't have any of that on this version since it's more accurate to the movie. So his neck moves all around. Just trying to get it straightened up. There we go. So I'm guessing if I had the Ultimate version, that the neck would be where you would where the neck meets the shoulder would be where you would remove the head, like with Bela. So, but yeah, nice matte black all over the suit. Frankenstein in the original Remco figure was wearing a black suit with a green shirt underneath. And a lot of the merchandise that they do nowadays, based on Universal's style guide, has a green suit with a black shirt underneath. But to me, this is always the way I think about Frankenstein, is having the black suit with the green shirt. Since, again, the Remco action figure, that was what I had when I was a kid. That was what I was used to. All right, so let's go over his articulation. Frankenstein can look up about that far. He can look down about that far. Great range of motion at the neck. Like I said, you got a neck joint where it meets the shoulder and a neck joint where it meets the head. So you can move this head around any which way you want. Very cool articulation there. I like that an awful lot. Let's move on to the shoulders. Rotate his arm all the way around to the shoulders, and his arms go up about that far. So there we go. And he does have a single joint of articulation at the elbow. That's about the range of articulation you get at the elbow. And of course, that swivels all the way around, like so. And we have wrist articulation. The wrist rotates all the way around. And then about that range of motion going down. Girlfriend. About that range of motion going up. So we can get all kinds of cool manner of poses out of his hands. Various creepy kind of Frankenstein type poses. So have him walking around with his arms outstretched in front of him. That's a little kind of like Bela in Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman, where he's blind, and that somehow became like how Frankenstein walks around in people's minds. That somehow, I guess, was memorable or something. But Boris didn't really do that because he wasn't blind. So let's see if we can get him into like one of these kind of supplicated poses. I remember this shot from the original movie. Like that. Pretty cool. So there is some torso articulation under here, but like with Dracula, since it's got the jacket kind of covering up a lot of it, that does kind of hinder the motion a little bit, but I don't think it hinders it a whole lot. Not as much as you might think. So he's got some pretty decent torso articulation. This figure also, I should mention again, it does glow in the dark, which I'm in the light right now, but put him under my desk, I can see him glow in the dark a little bit. So really, like, shouldn't you want all your Universal monster figures to glow in the dark? Doesn't that make sense? That just kind of seems to me like that would be what you would want. So his leg can kick up about that far. Again, he's got this kind of rubber trunk piece that kind of hinders that a little bit, and the jacket kind of hinders it a little bit. But like if you had the operating table, you could have him kind of sitting up on it like that if you wanted to. That's pretty cool. Got knee articulation, got a single joint of articulation at the knee. Not the best range of motion, doesn't look like, but you get about 90 degrees out of it, and that rotates all the way around. So, and then he's got the big clunky Frankenstein boots, and those can point down about that far and point up about that far with the articulation. And it does have a rocker ankle on there, so you can get it into some cool poses. Frankenstein, though, he's supposed to be kind of a stiff character. He walks around kind of stiffly. He probably doesn't need a whole heck of a lot of articulation, but it's always good to have extra articulation. So, or one of those poses in the orange monster book that I had where he was standing in a doorway, just kind of like that. And then I remember another pose. I think this was the first time I'd seen this was actually in one of those David J. Skal books, The Monster Show. David J. Skal was a great author who wrote a lot about the classic monsters and was particularly a big fan of Dracula. Unfortunately, he was killed in a car accident last year. Tragic loss for the monster fan community. I was a big fan of his. I loved his stuff. So, and even though it's not the glow in the dark version, we can go ahead and get a shot of him next to Dracula. And he's much taller than Dracula, which is not accurate in real life, because in real life, Bela was actually quite a bit taller than Boris Karloff. So really should look more like that. Although he does have the platform shoes on, so maybe it'd be a little closer to even. But you can't have Frankenstein be shorter than Dracula. That just doesn't make any sense. It wouldn't look right when they're standing on the shelf if Frankenstein were shorter than Dracula. You got to have Frankenstein be the taller of the two. So this is a really cool figure, and I really like it. I'm definitely going to get the ultimate version later on because I do want to have the more realistic, movie accurate version. I do definitely want to have that. But as far as the glow in the dark figures go, like I can't imagine them doing a better job with it than they did with this. This is great. And like I said, I had the original Remco mini monsters when I was a kid, so this just hits me right in the nostalgia button. This is exactly what I would want out of a Frankenstein action figure. And he glows in the dark. That's just the icing on the cake. Don't you want a Universal Monsters? They should all glow in the dark, even the ultimate versions. Like, figure out a way to make this guy glow in the dark. Ooh, this cape full up. But I set him down. So yeah, figure out a way to make this guy glow in the dark. Do that. That'd be cool. So yeah, that's pretty much it for this episode. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, make sure that you like and subscribe and all the fun you can talk. Leave a comment. Let me know what you think about Frankenstein, both the character in general and the figure specifically. Is it annoying you that I'm calling him Frankenstein and not Frankenstein's monster? I'm not gonna say Frankenstein's monster throughout the whole video. I know that Frankenstein is the name of the guy who made him and not the name of the monster. I'm just calling it Frankenstein for ease in this video. So, you know what I say anytime somebody says, actually, Frankenstein isn't the name of the monster. It's the name of the doctor who created him. I say he wasn't a doctor because he didn't graduate from college. He was a dropout. If we're going to be pedantic, let's be pedantic. But anyway, that's pretty much it for this one. Make sure you check back tomorrow. I'll be opening the Wolfman, and we will talk to you next time. Bye.